Well, good morning. I'm back. My name is Jeremiah. I have the honor of being one of the pastors that serve here at the church. Happy Father's Day to you. And since Theron brought it up, have you heard the joke about pizza? Nah, it's too cheesy. I won't say it. One of my favorite things in the world, I like to suffer in my contemplation. Like some people like I go for prayer walks. I like to sit in saunas. It's like one of my favorite things, to go into a good dry sauna, and you can pour steam over it. And it's only best, 180 degrees is fine. But when it gets to 200 degrees, there's a line there where I get to sit a half hour. I meditate. I do my prayer in saunas. It's like my best life. I love a sauna. And I love a sauna because it's quiet. There are certain rules about saunas. Well, I'm not going to tell you about some of them, but the rule I like is that it's kind of not a place you talk. You might give a general grunt to the guy coming in, what's up, man? And that's all you're going to do. Because you're all suffering together, that's all you need. You just need the solidarity of 200 degrees and suffering. And then there's a little contest who can outlast each other, but it's unconscious, and I always win. So I want you to know that. So there's been a new trend about 5 years ago. I was noticing these young men would come into the gym, maybe early 20s, and they were talking, and they had community, and they would come into the sauna and talk to me. Now, I don't think anybody explained to them, this is not the place we talk. But they would chat, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do? My favorite question in post-Christian world in Davis and Santa Cruz, what do you do? That won't be a complicated answer. Sometimes I say I work for a nonprofit. I leave it at that because I don't want to do it. But we have these chats. And what I found over the last few years is these young men are coming in constantly looking for something, starving for something, and they're finding it at the gym. And I think they're looking for community a little bit. The more I'm in the locker rooms or I'm working out or I'm in the sauna, the culture's just changed a little bit to where these young men are finding community at the gym. They're finding identity at the gym. They're finding who they are at the gym. And it made me really think about this series and this Father's Day. And I'm just going to ask the question. It's not a greeting question, don't worry. But what is a good man like today? Because I think that's what these young men are searching for. What does it mean to be a good man? Doing it with others, talking to older men like myself in the sauna, trying to see what life is and what makes for a good life. Man, I'm going to suggest something that we've lost a little something these days, a little lost like the young men in the gyms. Maybe it's community, maybe it's purpose. Not quite sure how to name it all the time, but I know that many men are looking for it right now and maybe finding it in the wrong places. I think of this thing called the manosphere. Don't look it up. It's this horrifying part of the internet where men have decided that masculinity requires degrading of women and raising themselves up as some kind of new warrior caste in today's culture. It's a kind of return to traditional masculinity where the enemy of men are women and men cannot be feminine in the least. And we cannot be men until women are back in the home like in the 1850s or something. And then finally we'll be men again. What is a good man like today, I wonder? I want to talk about men on Father's Day. We talked about our sisters on Mother's Day. So we're going to talk about the men. It is for everybody, though. Ladies, you can't check out and watch the World Cup game. I'm very sorry. I believe Spain is winning. You're like, don't tell me. Too late. See, and for me, it's for Mother's Day. Mother's Day is a day, I don't just celebrate our mothers, but in the church, we celebrate our sisters in Christ, the work they've been called to, and the goodness they have done among us. And so today, Father's Day is a good day about thinking what it means to be a man of God, what it looks like in this day and age when men seem so confused with who they are that we might be able to look at old stories and discern what God has for us. We're starting a new series, as Theron mentioned, and as we did last summer, joining what our kids will be studying in Breakaway. I remember they told me, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to study King David, Jeremiah. I'm like, okay, King David. David lived 3,000 years ago. David was called a man after God's own heart, and he did terrible and beautiful things. We won't tell the kids about the terrible things, but he did terrible and beautiful things. So you invite me to consider David, it gets really complicated. Like my own relationships with my dad or men older than me, much like that is the same relationship with David where it just gets complicated. I wish I could tell you he lived a perfect life and went to heaven. He did not. He did things that would make any of us horrified and should. And yet, God still called him a man after his own heart. David, like many of us, is complicated. But today we're going to tell his most famous story when he was a young man. Shall we? 1 Samuel 17 is where this story starts. And 1 Samuel 17 starts like this. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Sokoh, which belonged to Judah, and encamped between Sokoh and Ezekah at the Aphis Damim. Saul and the Israelites gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and formed ranks against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, Israelites stood on the other side, with a valley between them. With a valley between them. On the slide, you'll see a picture of that particular valley in Israel as it looks today. You know, the Philistines were the old enemies of Israel, very ancient enemies. They had fought for hundreds of years. They came, we think, from Crete, near Greece. They were sailors. They were people on the water, and they had sailed over and landed on the shores of Israel, what is now Tel Aviv. They lived on the flat shoreland, the coastland, kind of like Central Coast. It'd be like Santa Cruz, Monterey. They kind of lived there. And they would march inland every year to do war with the Israelites who lived up in the mountains. And if you know anything about mountains and coastland, in between are these foothills, right? Much like our valley. You see the foothills on your way up the mountains. And you can see this as the battle of Sonora or Auburn. There they battled at Auburn. The mountain people met the coast. Santa Cruz met, Truckee. And there they did battle in the valleys of Auburn, right? Very similar kind of layout. And Saul and the Israelites, here come the Philistines. Let's go down and meet them. Don't let them get too far into our territory. And so they do meet them. They line up across the sides of the valley. You could imagine one from our camera view, one on the further side here, where maybe they're up on the other side. And down in that valley marches what can only be described as a monster. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man from among yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "Today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we might fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Single combat was a fairly reasonable way to deal with battles. Instead of lots of people dying, you'd send your champion down to the middle, and they'd have it out. It's kind of an old story we tell as humans. And the Philistines, out of the ranks of the Philistines comes Goliath the Philistine. The story here has him at about 9 foot 9 inches. 9 foot 9 inches. Later, Bibles were kind of changed. We know they were changed later because I think people met people that couldn't believe could be possibly someone that big. And so later editions of the Bible, changed by perhaps a monk here and there to make it sound a little bit better, said that Goliath was 6 foot 9 inches, which is still pretty tall, but that's my son's height. And that's tall, but that's not Goliath. Goliath in the oldest stories was just around 10 feet. 10 feet. This giant is straight out of the legends of the people of Israel. They are not just facing old enemies, they are facing old monsters from their past. 440 years or so before this, the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness after they left Egypt. And God says, go into the promised land of Israel, go spy it out, it's yours now, go take it. And 12 spies go in, and they came back. You remember the story? They said, up in the mountains there are giants. There's a tribe of giants. They're named the descendants of Anak, or the Anakim. And the Anakim were ancient giants that still lived in Israel. And so when they saw them, what was their response, do you think? Oh, they were afraid. They were afraid. Old enemies, that all these enemies did was draw fear out of them. These stories actually go all the way back to the flood. Genesis 6 says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans who bore them children. These were the heroes of old, warriors of renown. I love when the Bible just throws these statements out like we all understand them. We're like, whoa, can you pause for a second? Is there background in any of that? Nope, just moving on to the flood. I'm like, no, need some background. Don't know what a Nephilim is. I don't know what angels did what with women. What is happening in the old stories? What is happening? All you need to know is the Nephilim were giants. the ancient giant race. They somehow survived the flood, which is terrifying. Maybe they just stood up. I have no idea. They found a nice mountain and just like, wait it out. We're on Everest. Just wait it out, fellows. I have no idea how they did it. And Goliath is from those beings. He is the smaller cousin, great-great-great-grandson of the Nephilim, who made the Anakim, who made Goliath. This, and the Israelites see Goliath, is a monster out of their legends. It's a monster of the stories their grandparents told. I bet you they didn't believe in them. Would you? This is 450 years. Think about the stories we tell about 450 years ago. We tell stories like, there's no way that's still a thing, or that wasn't real back then, or we'd never see that again. These were not old men's tales, though. Suddenly, in that moment, as Israel lines up saying, this is just another battle, the monster comes out. Not just a Philistine, who is their deepest enemy, a monster that has hampered them and harried them and terrified them for centuries. And he walks out, and they feel it in their bones. All the old fear, all the old terror, the lions hunting them in the grass, every ounce of fear and fight or flight kicks in all at once for thousands of men. Reminds me a little of Jurassic Park, the movie. Yeah. Like when dinosaurs first showed up, could you imagine? Like, we found them, we're going to make new ones. Please don't. See in the movie, doesn't end well. Does not end well. Make the small ones, those are fine, I think. Not the raptors for sure. Definitely not the T-Rex, please. But you can imagine, suddenly you have this thing we've only seen bones of, we've only imagined, and it is in your presence. And it is all the old human fears pop up. And then it says, Scripture, for 40 days the Philistine Goliath came forward and took his stand morning and evening, and he screamed at them. That'd be a little unnerving. For 40 days. Like the one day was enough. I'm good now, thanks. No, 40 of them. He would make over and over and over. I feel like I can understand their procrastination at this point, can't you? I think my spiritual director said, Jeremiah, some of your procrastination is unhealthy, but some of it's just wise procrastination. This feels wise. The whole army is like, I don't think we're ready yet. We're going to do some more push-ups. Maybe we'll do some more sprints, and we'll see if one of us can finally stand out in the end. By the way, just to note, King Saul, who passes on this honor, is probably not too far from my height. It was said he stood shoulders above the rest of the nation. Who was the one that was supposed to march out to meet Goliath? Their giant. And yet their giant was all 6'3", still missed it by about 3.5 feet. Verse 19, now Saul, the tall one, and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, took provisions, and went as Jesse commanded him to his brothers. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. David left the things in the charge of the keepers of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went to greet his brothers. As he talked with them, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. All the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very much afraid. Enter David. David is probably 13. He's a middle schooler. He's a young man out of the fields. Goliath is literally chasing everyone out of the field. And he's out now by himself. The valley stinks of old fear. It stinks of it. But like 450 years before, there was 2 brave spies that thought they could take the giants. 10 said, no way. 2 were like, we got this. One was named Caleb. Caleb's a good one. Caleb is like David's great spiritual grandfather in this story. In fact, later after the Israelites take out the whole country, the giants are still up in the hill country. They actually lived probably where Jerusalem is now, to be honest. And for years, nobody would take them. And Caleb, on his 80th birthday, said, I got this. And he took his men up and he kicked the giants' butts. It's in Scripture, very specific in the Hebrew. Kicked their butts, and he drove them to where? Where did the tribe of giants run? To the Philistines. He kicked them out, and they fled before him. He looked at the giants and said, I got this. And out of that comes David and comes Goliath. These are old stories. This is not a boy in a valley. This is nations and heroes meeting again, ancient enemies and monsters. David is remembered in this story, I think, pretty well. And he's remembering the story of Caleb, and I bet he's standing there having heard it all his life. He said, do you not remember the stories? The time we backed down to the giants over and over. We don't have to do that anymore. And the spirit of Caleb, he offers not just to confront Israel's enemies, the Philistines. David offers to confront ancient monsters. And there's a funny scene here, which was on the video, where David tells King Saul to do it, and Saul puts him in his big armor, and it just doesn't work out. It'd be like if I brought a middle schooler up here and put him in my suit for funerals or something, and they're like, this doesn't work, Jeremiah. Stuff just hanging off, and this is not quite right for me. So David chooses to go out alone in the picture here and to stand against Goliath. There's a recent retelling by Malcolm Gladwell where he says, well, if there's really a giant, he would have been unable to move that well, and people this tall don't work, so David really was kind of an underdog, but not really. That's not what the story is saying. This is a Sherman tank in human form. It's like if you rode a horse at a tank. I got this with my lance and my horse versus a modern tank. That is what the story is telling us. This thing is a monster. And so David takes his staff, and he chooses 5 stones from the wadi or the creek, puts them in his shepherd's bag, in the pouch. His sling was in his hand. He drew near the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near David with his shield bearer in front of him. I'm going to just sit with David just for a minute in that picture. Woo, that's a lot. That is a lot. My fingertips are 9 feet. You got to add a foot to the top of my fingertips. That's a bunch right there. And he stands, and he stands, and he bends for stones, and he prepares himself. I want you to see David as a man right now, after a man after God's own heart. I want you to see him in this moment as a good man. In all of our stories, this one being a perfect example, I think. I do believe men have a real job in the world we're called to. This is all the stories, it's not just the Bible. I think the Bible gives us the perfect example. And men, I think our calling is we confront monsters. Simply that. We confront monsters. David is moving into the stories of the best men in history and in literature. The oldest stories we tell, we say, what are men responsible for seeing and confronting the monsters of this world? His ancestors and men in renown had done it before him. I told you about Caleb who took down the monsters. But before him, about 80 years before that, a man named Moses goes to fight King Og of Bashan. King Og of Bashan, the Israelites were like, we can't do it, we can't fight him. And then God gave him to Moses' hands. His burial crypt was 13 and a half feet tall by 6 wide. Goliath is the small cousin of the old giants. Moses started this tradition saying, we fight monsters. We see them, we do not run, we fight them, we confront them, we call them monsters, and then we deal with them. Men confront monsters. Later, Paul's going to call these things, Apostle Paul, powers. Things that seem too big for us, that have a huge effect on us we do not understand. Now, powers is neutral. So what Paul goes on to say is there are dark powers. There are things in this world, in our stories, in our history, that seem to have incredible power over us. Monsters of old. If you ever want to cry, men, I listen to this song about once a month when I need a good cry. Real men cry, by the way. Monsters by James Blunt. He wrote it about his dad as he was dying. He also had a complicated relationship with his dad, as I believe probably many of us have with our dads, and many of us dads have with our sons. And in the lyrics of the song, he says, and while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, just close your eyes. Don't be afraid. It's my turn to chase the monsters away. I love that passing. He listened to this song as my grandfather died. I will chase the monsters away. Because Grandpa, stop filming, please. Just kidding. Grandpa chased the monsters away. And we pass it on, and we pass it on. David confronts the monsters of his people. As young men, by the way, I think we have the honor of confronting our tribe and family's monsters and dragons and demons. Our family struggles with mental health or addiction or infidelity or abuse. When we are young men, I think we get to confront that exterior monsters. By the way, there's an old story that Naomi had two daughters-in-law. Remember the story, Naomi and Ruth? Ruth remained faithful. Ruth's daughter-in-law, Oban, went back to her people, the Moabites. And there's a really old story that Oban's son was named Goliath. Goliath isn't just enemy monsters, it's David's families. This is like his second cousin once removed. He's related to Goliath in the old stories. So he's confronting not just the monsters of his people, but the monsters of his own family. The darkness of his own family. Like David, though, and like all men, we will have to confront monsters of our own making as we get older, don't we? But for now, let us celebrate that we get to confront monsters from outside of us. That men, we get to look into these and see them and name them. What are the monsters that you inherited? What are the monsters of your history? What are your family struggles? What do your monsters look like? I'm aware they're not literal monsters, but they just, the metaphor works for me. There's this movie called The Babadook. And The Babadook has this horrifying, it's one of the scariest movies I've ever watched. I don't watch horror movies because that would be bad for a pastor. That's all I watch. This movie has this horrifying monster, and by the end you realize it's the family's history of mental health struggles and the darkness of their story. And it's like, whoa, that's real. That's some real stuff there. What are the monsters that haunt your people and your family? Noah Kahn in the song Season of the Sticks said, "So I thought if I piled something good in all my bad, that I could cancel out the darkness I inherited from Dad." And I wonder what that looks like for us men. You know, David did show us being a man is bravely confronting monsters far more powerful than we are. And I think there's a temptation in this to return to his level of violence, to pick up our stones. I think we're seeing that in modern culture. Back to violence, back to guns, we can do this. And again, I'm not here actually to critique American culture. It's probably too big for me at this point. We're here to be the church, and we're here to be a people of God, and we're here to be good men of God. And so I'm only considering this in the context of the church for now. We need violence to define us, men. We need violence just like David taught us to do it violently. The problem is his grandson showed us a better way, because his grandson didn't reach for stones, he reached for a cross. When he went to his battle, he picked up a cross. Like this picture. David's grandson bent over to face the devil, and he went for his cross, not stones. Jesus defeated all the Goliaths on the cross and taught us how to. Not a return to violence, but a powerful return to grace and peace. Far more courageous is to lean into God and say, I don't need the violence, Lord. I will join you, Lord, in a different way. Not a return to violence, but a powerful new grace. A dependence on God so we don't have to resort to violence. So David did it imperfectly. His grandson showed us the way as people of God. Now, he's like this whole sermon, like to celebrate men means we leave out women. By the way, to celebrate men does not mean that any more than celebrating women leaves out the men. As if these traits don't translate to each other, as if there are not sisters among us like Susan Cosio that hasn't run off a few monsters in her time, because I can tell you she has. I hope I have learned to be a helper from my sisters, and I hope my sisters have learned from their brothers how to run off monsters. See, this is the deepest story that's the problem of our entire identity, men, is I think we've been told over and over again the opposite of the masculine is the feminine. That somehow Saul was girly because he didn't go fight Goliath. That to not be a man is to be like a woman. Paul once said this, when I became a man, I put away what? Childish things. Childish. Your opposite man is not women. It is the child, the fearful one, the one who is small and lives in smallness. Opposite of manliness is not femininity, it is childishness. Childishness makes us run from our responsibilities. Men are not struggling because women have more rights. We've been blaming that on Eve for a few thousand years, haven't we? We haven't stopped much. Same story, just different translation. Women's fault, like, there was an apple once. We can tell that story later. Men struggle because we are being made childish. We're being made selfish. We're being made small. And we're being told we don't have stories anymore. And I tell you, the Bible says we have stories. We have responsibilities. We must see evil. We must name it. We must deal with it. Let us men confront the monsters of our own making, monsters of our families, monsters of our people. Let us see them, name them, and lean into them. I hear Paul saying our fight is not against flesh and blood. And in the Ephesians passage, I want you to hear this. It's going to sound like this in the Message. So that about wraps it up. God is strong, and he wants you strong. God is strong, and he wants you strong. So take everything the Master has set out for you, well-made weapons of the best material, your crosses. Put them to use so you will be able to stand up to everything the devil throws your way. This is no weekend war that we'll walk away from and forget about it in a couple hours. This is for keeps, a life or death fight to the finish against the devil and his angels, against the deepest, oldest, worst monsters humans have ever encountered. There is real darkness in this world. Good men after God's own heart, do not abide it. We do not make excuses for it. We do not avoid it. We do not move away from it in fear. We see it. We name it. We confront it. We do it together, men, in church, because none of us can do this alone. We stand together to be men of God. Good men see it and name it and confront the monsters around us. So once again, David is a man after God's own heart, and that's very true. He grabbed rocks. He moved to the front. And in the end, he could have told the story, like when I was 13, I took down my first giant. I started my first company. I graduated college when I was 12. Let the story keep going. I was all on my own. I did it all by myself. Everyone was a coward. He didn't do that. David said to the Philistine, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin. I come to you in the name of Adonai of the armies, Lord of hosts, the God of armies of Israel, whom you have defied. He gave credit to Adonai of the armies, Yahweh of hosts, because he saw all he had done, and he knew Adonai had done it, the Lord of the universe. Good men know they needed God the whole time, that their stories were never their own, but every step they took, every victory they've seen, and every monster they've helped to put down was Adonai of armies the whole time. It was Christ in us and through us. We see monsters, friends, but more. Let us adjust our eyes to God's faithfulness, shall we? Would you stand? Would you sing to that Lord, that Adonai who stands with us even when we don't remember he is with us?